Prithvi Shantirantariksha Shantir Dyaus Shantir Disha Shantiravantara Disha Shantiragni Shantir Vayu Shantiraditya Shantish Chandrama Shantir Nakshatrani Shantirapah Shantiroshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Gau Shantiraja Shantirashva Shantir Purusha Shantir Brahma Shantir Brahmana Shantir Shantireva Shanti Shantir Me Astu Shantihi. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayedhi Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. We're doing that section of the 12th chapter where Krishna describes how to practice the path of devotion, how to practice Bhakti Yoga. The last verse that we saw last week was on verse number 8, in which Krishna said, "Fix your mind on me alone, let your intellect rest in me, you will live in me alone hereafter, there is no doubt." So, theoretically at least, the path is pretty straightforward and simple. To fix our mind entirely on God, let our all thinking be focused on the Divine Being, and then we continue to dwell in God forever. Looks like a pretty simple way. Except, look at that phrase, alone. Fix your mind on me. Well, we all try to do that. As spiritual seekers, our prayer, worship, meditation, we try to fix our mind on God. But on me alone, we know that really is not our present state, where our mind is fixed only on God. Yes, among the many things on which my mind is fixed, God is maybe one. So this seems like a tall order. To all of my thinking should be centered around my spiritual ideal, and my mind should be entirely on my spiritual ideal. So it really seems as if, not for me. Or it's like, it doesn't seem as if it's something I might be able to do right away. Does that mean then there is no hope for me? That there is no way I can practice the path of devotion? This is the concern that Krishna now addresses in the next 3 or 4 verses. So let's read verse number 9. Ata chittam samadhatum na shaknoshi mai sthiram abhyasa yogena tato Mamichhaptum dhananjaya. If, however, you are not able to fix the mind steadily on me, then through the yoga of practice, seek to attain me, O Dhananjaya. So here we find Krishna saying, understanding, that's why Krishna is so much revered and respected and adored. If Krishna were to say, "What? You can't do it?" Then it's like, don't you know me well enough to know it's not possible for me to do? So Krishna already knows that it's not possible for Arjuna to do it. And so he says, although he's gentle enough, rather than telling Arjuna directly, no, you can't do it, he said, if you're not able to do this, then practice the yoga of practice. You might remember one of the questions that Arjuna had asked earlier was how to bring the mind under control. And Krishna said 2 things, abhyasa and vairagya, means detachment, letting go. The more I practice letting go of the things that I don't need, letting go of the things that bring me pain and stress and worry, the easier the mind will come under our control. You might notice that a lot of the things that are problematic in our own lives they cling to our life, or they seem to be clinging to our life. It might seem as if we are not able to get rid of them, but the truth is, in most cases, they are not clinging to us. We are clinging to them. And therefore, for us to then say, oh, this is so much, this is bothering me, why doesn't this leave me? Why doesn't it go away? It's never going to go away because I'm holding it. In order for it to go, I just need to let go. There is a story told of an old woodcutter. This was in the good old days when people went to the woods to cut wood for fuel and things like that. And so he had gotten old, and he still had to, was very poor, of course. So every day he had to go and cut the wood and lift that whole load, put it on his head, take it back to the city, sell it, and then able to earn a little bit money out of that. And so once he got so tired, so exhausted, so like, what kind of a drudgery this life is. And so he just, while trying to lift that heavy load, and he just says, I'm tired. I wish I were dead. And sometimes some of us may feel like that, and sometimes some of us may say like that. Like, I don't want to keep on living. I wish I wasn't alive. And he said something like that, I wish I were dead. And then suddenly the story goes to say, the messenger of death appeared before him. He said, oh, did you call me? And then when that Yama is often is a figure appears in Indian literature about who is the messenger, the one who comes to carry the soul after death. And so suddenly this messenger of death appears and said, did you call me? Now, when here is this person to take him away has come, and then this old man says, you know, this was very difficult to lift by myself. I just needed some help, someone to help me lift it, and he just completely changed the whole story. So that might be true in many of the things that seem problematic in our lives. Sure, things are problematic. Sure, we might wish that these things go away from our life. But oftentimes we will discover that a major reason why these problematic things don't go away is because I'm holding on to them. Sure, there could be some other reasons as well. Not everything is self-created in some sense. But a major amount of things is I'm holding on to it. And therefore, if I just let go, a lot of our problems can be solved by just letting go. Vivekananda's that poem, the Song of the Sannyasin, he says, thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags thee on. Then cease lament, let go thy hold. Sannyasin bold, say Om Tat Sat Om. I think it's something very important to remember. And so that's why Krishna said, among the two qualities necessary to keep our mind under control, to have mastery over our mind, when the mind becomes our instrument and we become the boss, the first thing is to learn to let go. And the second is abhyasa, practice. If we lose heart quickly, when we try to do something and it doesn't work and we fail, some of us may say, okay, let me try again. And then it fails again. And you say, let me try again. And you again fail. There is a limit to how often we are able to digest our own failure. At some point, we are going to say, it's never going to work. I give up. I'm not going to do it. Now that letting go there won't work. We have to keep on trying. Keep on trying until you succeed. No matter you fail 1,000 times, you can still try. There was, I don't remember the details obviously, but there was, someone had sent a thing like the story of one man. He did he failed. He ran for some local elected office. He failed. He tried to run for the election of the House. He failed. He tried for the Senate and blah blah blah. Some list of failures, and then in the end says ultimately this person became the president of America, and it was Abraham Lincoln. So the idea is that sometimes our attention is so much captured by success or by successful people that oftentimes we don't recognize that how much struggle has gone behind it, how often they have failed before they succeeded. Even these people who get all the Nobel Prize for chemistry or physics, or these great scientists, some of the great discoveries or inventions they have done, all that we get to see are the experiments in which they succeeded. But before they could do that one successful experiment, they probably done 10,000 others which failed, which didn't work. And a lot of these science journals, they will publish your paper only with things that have worked. I wish there was some journal which says things which didn't work or failed experiments. I think that would be very helpful, even from a very practical standpoint. Because if there are, like, say, 5 different laboratories in 5 different parts of the world, and they're all, let's say, working on a similar problem, and one lab discovers this just doesn't work, then it doesn't make any sense that the other 4 will just try to do the same thing when it's already known that it doesn't work. On the other hand, if these people publish a paper and said, we tried this many times, this doesn't work, then these other guys will say, okay, it doesn't work, let's try something new. I think science might make a much faster progress if even the failures were publicized, not just the successes. But that's just my opinion, and nothing is going to change. But this is generally how our mind functions. We always look at success, but we don't look at the process that made that success possible. And therefore, in spiritual life, really, I mean, this is true everywhere, but our focus now is about how to apply these principles to our own spiritual life. And it is this: practice. And that is what he means here, the yoga of practice. So it's not enough to say, oh, I tried meditation, doesn't work, or I can't do it. No, there is no such thing as I can't do it. Well, I may not have been able to do it now. Maybe I'm not able to keep my mind focused for more than 30 seconds. Well, that's good. At least 30 seconds is not bad. If I can keep my mind focused for 30 seconds, and I say, keep on trying, and maybe after a week I find, oh, today I can do 45 seconds, I can do a minute. But that's already progress. This is how, it's a step by step we need to advance in life. And so what Krishna is saying is, if it's not possible for you to fix your mind on God alone, letting your intellect rest on God alone, okay, practice. Even if you don't succeed, practice again. Even these great musicians, how much hours and hours of practice have gone behind before you have a Yo-Yo Ma or some of these great musicians. So that's what Krishna is saying here. So he gives an alternative. If you can't do this, then keep on practicing. Because practice, as they say, practice makes us perfect. But what if I'm not able to do even practice? What, like, I've tried, even it just is not in my DNA. Let's say someone says practice is not in my DNA, then what are you going to do? Let's then look at verse number 10. Abhyasepya samarthosi matkarma paramo bhava madarthamapi karmani kuruvan siddhim avapsyasi. If you are unable even to practice, then by solely devoted to rites for me, even by doing rites for my sake, you will attain perfection. So, if practicing, and here by practice is meant practice of prayer, worship, meditation, because these are also activities, but prayer and meditation especially are internal activities. Because what are you doing? You're just sitting in one place and trying to put your mind on the spiritual ideal. But if the mind is not under control, it's not easy to do that. It's so much more easy for me to say, someone says, put this on the table here. That's so much more easy to do than say, put your mind on God. Because the mind is so subtle and mind is internal. So what Krishna is saying is, well, if that practice is difficult for you, then do things for me. Mat karma means for me, karma is work. So do work for me. Now everything external, tangible activities that we can do for God will be easier than these subtle internal activities for God. And so among the things that people do for God are fasting, let's say, one example. Because that's something like, well, I know how to eat. And if I know how to eat, I know what it means not to eat. Again, that's difficult, but it's doable. Of course, fasting doesn't mean like stop eating forever, obviously. But occasionally, say, not, or even eating less than you normally do, occasionally, or just subsisting on liquid once a month or once a fortnight, or just having fruits on some days and nothing else. And there are various degrees of fasting, but the idea is, if I do it as a part of my spiritual discipline, and fasting plays a role in one's spiritual practice. And there are people who say, well, I can't meditate, but I do this, I observe this fast. Or singing, devotional singing. Now that's an activity. It's meditating might be tough, but if I have a flair for singing, then singing is a great activity. You might know the story. Vivekananda told the story of a person. He said one person was sitting alone in a little shrine. It's a temple actually, but no one was there at that time of the day when there wasn't anyone. This was one person singing for the Lord, but he had no talent for singing. It was terrible. There was no rhythm, there was no voice, there was nothing. It was really bad. But anyway, this person was alone, and the Lord didn't have much choice. They just to listen. What can you do? And apparently, another one person entered in the temple, in that chapel, and was sitting and trying to pray. But this terrible singing was going on. So this person then goes and tells that gentleman who was singing, you know what, just stop. It's not working. Don't do it. That person got so annoyed, this stranger coming and telling him, don't sing. So he says, who are you to tell me not to sing? I'm not singing for you. I'm singing for the Lord. And then that gentleman, that the person then told this singer, he said, look, by your singing, if you're not able to please me, an ordinary mortal human being, how do you expect to please the Lord of the whole universe? The idea is that a little bit of flair for music if we have, and then singing can become an act done out of love for God, doing something for the divine being. If I don't have the flair for singing, if I can at least appreciate music, then you can play. Nowadays, there's a digital. Nowadays, you don't even need. Earlier days, you needed a tape recorder or a record player. Now, the smartphone has become so smart that it does a bunch of other things. In fact, a phone doing what phones do is a very little small part of what the smartphones do nowadays. In any case, listening to music has become easier thanks to technology. And so, again, listening to music helps us keep our mind on God. So these are the kind of things we can do if these internal practices like prayer and meditation are difficult. Now, worship, doing external worship is much easier than doing internal worship. So you try to visualize the divine in your heart and try to mentally worship. It's possible, but some people may find that difficult. It's so much more easier than to have an external, an altar, and do just like the worship we had last night. That's much easier to do. Not just doing the worship, but even preparing for the worship. Many of you come and help for the pujas. Now, doing that work for the worship, or doing that work in any place of worship, the work that you do at the Vedanta Society. Now, if you remember that the work that you do here or in any place of worship that you go to is done as an offering to God. That is done not for fun, but of course, it will be fun in the sense it brings joy, but that's not the main motivation behind doing it. The primary motivation is this helps me go closer to my spiritual ideal. It helps me remember my spiritual ideal more. So even that work will come under it. So that's what Krishna is saying. If you are unable to practice, then be solely devoted to rites for me means doing work for me. Even by doing those things, you will attain perfection. Now, if I'm unable to even do this? Not to worry, Krishna has a prescription for that as well. So verse number 11. Athaitadapya shaktosi kartum madhyogama sarva karma phalatyagam tatav kuru yatatmavan. If, however, you are unable to do even this, then taking refuge in me and being self-controlled, renounce the fruit of all actions. Now, this is what he says. If I'm not able to do any of the things that were mentioned before, then take refuge in the Lord. In other words, when is it possible for us to completely surrender to the divine being? Oftentimes we are told, surrender to God, or pray to me with all my heart, all my soul, and so on. So when is it possible for me to completely surrender myself to the divine being? And that kind of a surrender occurs in a state of complete helplessness. Only when we realize that I am incapable of doing it by myself. Not out of laziness, because people who are lazy don't always feel that they can't do it. They feel they can, they just don't want to do it. And one of the ways, it could be a strategy. If I don't want to do something, it's easier to say, I can't do it. But deep down, they don't feel they can't do it. So this is not about being lazy. This applies to someone who has really tried their best and have discovered, no, I can't do it. I feel myself so helpless that in that state of helplessness, complete surrender is possible. But helplessness really means that this little ego of ours within, which makes me think, I can do it, or I should do it, or it's somehow my responsibility, my duty. As long as this I and my are strong, surrender won't come. But it's a little bit, the example or the story that Ramakrishna used to tell is about a bird who sat on the mast of a ship. And the ship was docked, and then afterward, when it set sail, the bird was, God knows, maybe asleep or what. Afterward, the ship went right deep inside the water, and then this fellow opens his eyes and discovers, what am I doing here? And so he wants to go back to land. And he flies in the eastern direction and flies for a long time, and still the ship has really gone deep in the mid-ocean. And so this little bird doesn't find any water, and it's not able to remain in air for a long time. So it just hurriedly comes back and sits on the mast of the ship again. And then he said, okay, let me try another direction. Goes towards then west, no land. North, south, tries everywhere, no land. And then it discovers the safest place for me is just this ship, because there is no land anywhere. All that I need to do now, my wings are tired, I'm incapable of doing anything. So let me just sit here tight. And then the bird sits on there, and then finally, when the ship reaches its next destination, it finds the land has come. That is what can happen in our lives. But as long as our wings are not tired, there'll always be a little bit inside which can say, oh, I can do this, I can do this, I should do this. But when the wings are completely tired and you say, no, I can't do anything, then we'll just sit in one place, and that one place will be God. Sometimes in some books of devotion, they say that all of our spiritual practices are really meant to just exhaust ourselves, exhaust our wings. When the wings are exhausted, this false ego is just crushed and says, no, you can't do it. Then you say, oh, then I just surrender myself to God. Then I say, God alone can save me. So that is what Krishna means here. If you are unable to do even this, then taking refuge in me and being self-controlled. Now this self-controlled is very important, because I will not be able to let go of this. By self is meant here the ego. I will not be able to let go of my ego if that ego is not under my control. And so some amount of deep introspection, a deep kind of a self-knowledge, knowledge of what I am capable of doing and what I am not capable of doing is necessary. Only then is this complete surrendering everything to God becomes possible. And by surrendering is meant keeping nothing for oneself. It's not like, oh Lord, these are the things I can handle on my own, and these difficult stuff which I don't like, you please take care of it. That doesn't work. There is no partial surrendering. Surrendering is either you do it or you don't do it. And so this complete surrender is possible only when our mind, which is so troublesome, so slippery, comes a little bit under our control. And then we realize its limitations. And then we also realize that with this limited mind, I cannot grasp the unlimited. And it's then that we say, I give up. And if that giving up, if that surrender is real, genuine, and then we find the heart gets flooded with the power that comes from a higher source. Now, it's tempting to think, well, God was just waiting to crush my ego or to
or just God was saying, this fellow is egoistic, so I'm not going to help this person. This person's ego is gone, I'll help this person. Now that's a very childish way of thinking about God, because we try to think of God as some big person sitting somewhere judging us and deciding who should do what. Another way, or a better way perhaps, is to think of the divine power and energy and grace as being always available to all the people all the time. But because it's available does not mean that I can make use of it unless I'm able to open my heart to that divine power and divine being. And what obstructs, the door to my heart is closed by my ego. So unless the ego gets out of the way, God's grace and power cannot enter in. So although the statement, knock and it shall be opened, is sometimes interpreted to think as if we are the ones who have to knock at the door of the Lord and the Lord will open the door. From this way of thinking, actually it's the other way. It's almost possible to think that it's the Lord who is knocking at the door of our heart. But we are so busy with the sounds of this world, the sounds of all material needs and longings, that we are not even able to hear the knocking of the Lord. And if we are able to hear that knocking, we are not able to open the door because the ego has blocked it. And so we need to get that ego. And once that ego gets out of the way, then we'll find this enormous power and grace will just flood our heart. And so that is what Krishna is pointing out in verse number 11. Let's read verse number 12. Shreyo hi jnanam abhyasat jnanad dhyanam vishishyate dhyanat karma phala tyagaha Tyagat shantiranantaram. Knowledge is superior to mere practice. Meditation is superior to knowledge. Superior to meditation is renunciation of the fruit of action. From renunciation results peace immediately. So all these 3 or 4 options that Krishna has given up to this point that we saw today, he points out that this last thing that we read, that giving up the fruits, giving up everything, surrendering oneself completely to God, that results in peace immediately, because that is superior. That is superior to knowledge, that is superior to meditation, that is superior to practice. Superior than all of these things is this complete surrender to the divine. And as we saw, that complete surrender occurs only when this little ego gets out of the way. And in order for the ego to get out of the way, the ego must know itself. If the ego knows itself correctly, it will know that it's nothing. And that's why it is said, truly wise people are always humble. There is a saying in Sanskrit, Vidya dadati vinayam. True knowledge bestows humility. It's only this half knowledge or little knowledge that makes people egoistic, makes people proud. There's also the story that oracle of Delphi, which proclaimed that Socrates was the wisest man in Athens. And everyone was like, how come? How come he is wise? Even Socrates was wondering, why do they think I am wise? Then he looked inside and then he got the answer. And then Socrates said, now I know why I was considered wise. Because I am the only one who know I know nothing. And that was not like a great soundbite. That's what really he had discovered. And so that's the thing that we need to know. In fact, in one of the ancient Upanishads called the Kena Upanishad, it's several thousand years old, there is a statement. One who says, I do not know, knows. One who says, I know, does not know. And so humility, not some kind of a false modesty. It's not just about how you present yourself to the world and say, oh, I don't know anything. That's not humility. Humility comes from, actually humility is a great power. It's not a strategy. Only when there is great inner contentment and peace, such people can be truly humble. Wise people are always humble. And so that is what is meant here. So knowledge. It's possible to do things mechanically. Just do it. Why are you doing it? Oh, I just do it. So doing things knowingly, understanding the purpose behind it, understanding why it is done, how it is done, is better than just doing it, obviously. That's what is meant by saying knowledge is superior to mere practice. Now, by knowledge is meant here intellectual knowledge. So let's say, even the practice of prayer or meditation. So there is one thing is that just doing it. And if someone were to say, why are you doing it? I don't know, I'm just doing it. Now, even a mechanical practice of prayer or meditation might, will produce some effect. But if we do that practice knowingly, it will produce a greater effect. Years ago, one of our devotees in the West Coast went to the Swami there and said, so she had been practicing japa for a long time. And then she said, Swami, but I've been doing this, but why? Why it is done? And she had been explained why it was done, but she just couldn't get it. And she said, I don't understand it. What is the meaning? And blah, 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 blah. And then finally the Swami said, just do it. And the idea was this, and which makes sense, that as I said, you are pushed in, if you are going out in the rain, and whether you are going in the rain willingly or not willingly, happily or not happily, you're going to get wet. It doesn't matter whether you like it or not. Exactly in the same way, repeating God's name, repeating your mantra will produce its effect, whether you understand what it means or not. It will. That is the power in the mantra itself. Having said that, if you are able to repeat it with awareness of what it means, what it stands for, what does your practice really involve, with that knowledge, that practice becomes richer, that practice becomes more powerful. The progress is quicker. So mere practice in spiritual life will produce an effect, but if you want quicker progress, if you want a more intense practice, then knowledge must accompany it. Knowledge in the sense of why, how it is that I am doing these things. But that knowledge is still cerebral, it's still intellectual. Now what we want is to transform that knowledge into experience. Because if that knowledge is merely intellectual, and that knowledge will be stored in the brain, and the brain is a part of the body. So when I die, the body dies, all the parts of the body die. And so what is stored in the brain will be lost. That hard drive is gone. You can't recover data from it. If you have studied the Gita and just understood it well, and if you are born again, you have to study the Gita again. You can't say, well, it's there in my hard drive, it's gone. On the other hand, if you have studied the Gita, understood what it means, and made an effort to incorporate its teachings in your life, to try to live according to it as much as you can, then the transformation it brings about in your life, that is not physical. That will not disappear with death. So that is your net gain. You will never lose it. And therefore, meditation is superior to knowledge, because it is meditation that transforms theoretical understanding to genuine experience. An experience is not a entity that dies with death. And higher than this is the giving up the fruit of action. Because once that complete surrender comes, then the ego gets out of the way. When the ego gets out of the way, we might still be in this human frame, but everything else in it is just filled by God, with God's presence. Right now, God's presence within us seems obstructed by this limited idea of me being, oh, I'm this little human being. But when what makes me a little human being, this ego, which keeps my consciousness limited to this, gets out of the way, then inside will be just filled with the Lord. And that is why from that, peace results immediately. So that peace that passeth understanding that we all seek, the joy, the freedom, the perfection that we all seek will come. So knowledge superior to mere practice, meditation superior to knowledge, and renunciation of everything, giving up, letting go, surrendering of everything at the feet of God, that is superior to all of these things. So that is how Krishna praises this practice of complete surrender, surrendering the work as well as its fruit at the feet of God. So we saw these 4 verses today. Any comments, questions, thoughts that you have on this?
Swamiji, when you say that the renunciation is the ultimate form, do we need to first go through trying to fix our mind, trying to practice if we're unable to fix the mind, and trying to do rights if we're unable to do those other two? Do we have to progress through that path to be able to renunciate?
Yeah, that seems like a good way to do it. Because he says, if you're not able to do it, so we must first try to do it to find out whether we are able to do it or not. Isn't it? Yeah, so I think that would be a good way to go. Yeah, it's a little bit like asking, if you are given, say, 4 tasks and told in advance, this is the most difficult, this is less difficult, this is in the order, which would you choose? Suppose you are told, do this. If you can't do this, do this. If you can't do this, do this. If you can't do this, then do this. So which one would we try? I mean, I'm sure not everyone might go toward the first one. Some people say, well, let me do the easiest first. People are different. Yeah. But interestingly, what you will see, the puzzling part is this. Although it just begins by saying, first do this, if you can't do this, then do this, if you can't do this. So finally, what he says in verse number 11 seems to be like, if you can't do any of those early things, then you do this. And then in verse number 12, he praises that as the highest, which is interesting.
Fantastic question. But it's almost like, when you talk about going on the mountain different ways, seems like, that what Krishna is saying is that that's where you have to come. And if that's hard for you, then maybe this is the way. But
Sure.
In the end, the whole thing is, and when it's talking about knowledge, it's talking about the knowledge not you have gained yourself, but the one you have gained by listening or reading or something. So when you kind of understand the whole thing, then you have reached up there. That's the consciousness that is pervading,
Yeah, I think, good. What I see this as 4, I don't see these as like 4, the way it's described here, this doesn't seem like these are 4 independent paths to the goal. What it seems is, no matter which of these things you do, you will ultimately end up surrendering. And then that will give you the peace. So you can begin with knowledge, you can begin with practice, you can do this, and all of these things, if you try to do it sincerely, depending on your temperament, depending of your whichever resonates with your head and heart, or whichever you think capable of doing, no matter. But you tried to the best of your ability, and you will find that ultimately it will take you to the demolishing of the ego and completely surrendering to the divine. And so that's why then he praises it, saying that's the highest. Anything else? Okay. So when we meet next time, we will begin with verse number 13. Om Jananim Saradam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhurmuhu. We bow down to Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother again and again. So on Sunday, our subject will be learning how to learn Vedanta. Next Wednesday, we'll continue with this study, and on Tuesday and Saturday, our meditation also will continue as usual. So we'll conclude with a prayer now on page 3. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.